Hello, everybody, and welcome to day whatever it is, 30 something. I don't know how many episodes I may have chopped the last bit of content into. Probably 2 or 3, so it's probably like 34, 33, something like that. But before I go to bed, would like to do some reading of Zarathustra. So, without further ado, see, we're 129 out of 154. We're almost done. Without further ado, Chapter 19? I think that's 19? The Bite of the Adder. Let me set up my timer. It's been running. I know how much time. Oh, fuck, I hate using the timer. You click like stop or reset, and then you click, but then the buttons change, and it starts up a timer, and it's just something where it like laps it, and you don't know what you're doing. Whatever. Starting the timer at 0. Turn off idle reading. The Bite of the Adder. One day had Zarathustra fallen asleep under a fig tree, owing to the heat, with his arms over his face. And there came an adder and bit him in the neck, so that Zarathustra screamed with pain. When he had taken his arm from his face, he looked at the serpent, and then did it recognize the eyes of Zarathustra, wriggled awkwardly, and tried to get away. Not at all, said Zarathustra. As yet hast thou not received my thanks. Thou hast awakened me in time. My journey is yet long. Thy journey is short, said the adder sadly. My poison is fatal, Zarathustra smiled. When did ever a dragon die of a serpent's poison, said he. But take thy poison back. Thou art not rich enough to present it to me. Then fell the adder again on his neck, and licked his wound. When Zarathustra once told this to his disciples, they asked him, And what, O Zarathustra, is the moral of thy story? And Zarathustra answered them thus. The destroyer of morality, the good and just call me. My story is immoral. When, however, ye have an enemy, then return him not good for evil, for that would abash him, but prove that he hath done something good to you. And rather be angry than abash anyone. And when ye are cursed, it pleaseth me not that ye should then desire to bless. Rather curse a little also. And should a great injustice befall you, then do quickly 5 small ones besides. Hideous to behold is he on whom injustice presseth alone. Did ye ever know this? Shared injustice is half justice, and he who can bear it shall take the injustice upon himself. A small revenge is humaner than no revenge at all, and if the punishment be not also a right and an honor to the transgressor, I do not like your punishing. Nobler is it to own oneself in the wrong than to establish one's right, especially if one be in the right. Only one must be rich enough to do so. I do not like your cold justice. Out of the eye of your judges there always glanceth the executioner and his cold steel. Tell me, where find we justice, which is love with seeing eyes? Devise me, then, the love which not only beareth all punishment, but also all guilt. Devise me, then, the justice which acquitteth everyone except the judge. And would you hear this likewise? To him who seeketh to be just from the heart, even the lie becometh philanthropy. But how could I be just from the heart? How can I give everyone his own? Let this be enough for me. I give unto everyone mine own. Finally, my brethren, guard against doing wrong to any anchorite. How could an anchorite forget? How could he requite? Like a deep well is an anchorite. Easy is it to throw in a stone. If it should sink to the bottom, however, tell me, who will bring it out again? Guard against injuring the anchorite. If ye have done so, however, well then, kill him also. Thus spake Zarathustra. I don't think I got that at all. The only thing I started thinking about something that I've thought about a lot in the past, of this idea of what is the difference between revenge and justice. And in a sense, is justice just state-sponsored revenge? And I think on some level it very much is. I think I could argue. I suppose it depends on the system, of course, but oftentimes that's how it appears to me. But I don't think that's what this chapter was trying to get across, and whatever it was went completely over my head. Chapter 20, or not chapter 20, whatever it is, 20, Child and Marriage. I have a question for thee alone, my brother. Like a sounding lead, cast I this question into thy soul, that I may know its depth. Thou art young, and dearest child in marriage, desirous child in marriage. But I ask thee, art thou a man entitled to desire a child? Art thou the victorious one, the self-conqueror, the ruler of thy passions, the master of thy virtues? Thus do I ask thee. Or doth the animal speak in thy wish and necessity, or isolation, or discord in thee? I would have thy victory and freedom long for a child. Living monuments shalt thou build to thy victory and emancipation. Beyond thyself shalt thou build, but first of all must thou be built thyself, rectangular in body and soul. Not only onward shalt thou propagate thyself, but upward. For that purpose, may the garden of marriage help thee. A higher body shalt thou create, a first movement, a spontaneously rolling wheel, a creating one shalt thou create. Marriage. So call I the will of the twain to create the one that is more than those who created it. The reverence for one another, as those exercising such a will, call I marriage. Let this be the significance and the truth of thy marriage. But that which the many too many call marriage, those superfluous ones. What shall I call it? The poverty of the soul in the twain, the filth of the soul in the twain. The pitiable self-complacency in the twain. Marriage, they call it all, and they say their marriages are made in heaven. Well, I do not like it, that heaven of the superfluous. No, I do not like them, those animals tangled in the heavenly toils. Far from me also be the God who limpeth thither to bless what he hath not matched. Laugh not at such marriages. What child hath not had reason to weep over its parents? Worthy did this man seem, and ripe for the meaning of the earth. But when I saw his wife, the earth seemed to me a home for madcaps. Yea, I would that the earth shook with convulsions when a saint and a goose mate with one another. This one went forth in quest of truth as a hero, and at last got for himself a small decked-up lie. His marriage he calleth it. That one was reserved in intercourse and chose choicely. But one time he spoilt his company for all time. His marriage he calleth it. Another sought a handmaid with the virtues of an angel. But all at once he became the handmaid of a woman, and now would he need also to become an angel. Careful have I found all buyers, and all of them have astute eyes. But even the astutest of them buyeth his wife in a sack. Many short follies, that is called love by you, and your marriage putteth an end to many short follies, with one long stupidity. Your love to woman and woman's love to man, would that it were sympathy for suffering and veiled deities, but generally two animals alight on one another. But even your best love is only an enraptured simile and a painful ardor. It is a torch to light you to loftier paths. Beyond yourselves shall ye love some day, then learn first of all to love, and on that account ye had to drink the bitter cup of your love. Bitterness is in the cup, even of the best love. Thus doth it cause longing for the Superman. Thus doth it cause thirst in thee, the creating one. Thirst in the creating one, arrow and longing for the Superman. Tell me, my brother, is this thy will to marriage? Holy call I such a will, and such a marriage. Thus spake Zarathustra. I think he's basically, in his Zarathustrian way of kind of being a little bit of an ass about it, he's more or less just trying to tell people, be careful for what reason you marry, and be careful who you marry, and understand that it's natural to love easily on some level, but be careful what may come of it, and especially if you're considering having a child, in which case the child has to deal with what you've created because they are the subject of what you've created. But that might also be reading in my own feelings on the matter of things of marriage and having children and such, because I'm basically just repeating my own feelings on that, of be careful, and second, think before you have kids, think before you get married, is what I already feel like. So I'm like, am I putting that in there myself? I think I'm putting that in there myself. Yeah, let's go on to the next. Voluntary death. Many die too late, and some die too early. Yet strange soundeth the precept, die at the right time. Die at the right time, so teacheth Zarathustra. To be sure, he who never liveth at the right time, how could he ever die at the right time? Would that he might never be born. Thus do I advise the superfluous ones. But even the superfluous ones make much ado about their death, and even the hollowest nut wanteth to be cracked. Everyone regardeth dying as a great matter, but as yet death is not a festival. Not yet have people learned to inaugurate the finest festivals. The consummating death I show unto you, which becometh a stimulus and promise to the living. His death dieth the consummating one triumphantly, surrounded by hoping and promising one. Thus should one learn to die, and there should be no festival at which such a dying one doth not consecrate the oaths of the living. Thus to die is best. The next best, however, is to die in battle and sacrifice a great soul. But to the fighter equally hateful as to the victor is your grinning death which stealeth nigh like a thief, and yet cometh as master. My death praise I unto you, the voluntary death, which cometh unto me, because I want it. And when shall I want it? He that hath a goal and an heir wanteth death at the right time for the goal and the heir. And out of reverence for the goal and the heir, he will hang up no more withered wreaths in the sanctuary of life. Verily, not the rope maker's will I resemble. They lengthen out their cord, and thereby go ever backward. Many a one, also, waxeth too old for his truths and triumphs. A toothless mouth hath no longer the right to every truth. And whoever wanteth to have fame must take leave of honor betimes, and practice the difficult art of going at the right time. One must discontinue being feasted upon when one tasteth best. That is known by those who want to be long loved. Sour apples are there, no doubt, whose lot is to wait until the last day of autumn, and at the same time they become ripe, yellow, and shriveled. In some ageth the heart first, and in others the spirit. And some are orrery, I have no idea what that word means, in youth, but the late young keep long young. To many men life is a failure. A poison worm gnaweth at their heart. Then let them see to it that their dying is all the more success. Many never become sweet. They rot even in the summer. It is cowardice that hold them fast to their branches. Far too many live, and far too long hang they on their branches. Would that a storm came and shook all this rottenness and worm-eatenness from the tree. Would that there came preachers of speedy death. Those would be the appropriate storms and agitators of the trees of life. But I hear only slow death preached, and patience with all that is earthly. Ah, ye preach patience with what is earthly? This earthly is it that hath too much patience with you, ye blasphemers. Verily, too early died that Hebrew whom the preachers of slow death honor, and too many hath it proved a calamity that he died too early. As yet had he known only tears and the melancholy of the Hebrews, together with the hatred of the good and just, the Hebrew Jesus. Then was he seized with the longing for death. Had he but remained in the wilderness and far from the good and just, then perhaps would he have learned to live and love the earth, and laughter also. Believe it, my brethren, he died too early. He himself would have disavowed his doctrine had he attained to my age. Noble enough was he to disavow. But he was still immature. Immaturely loveth the youth, and immaturely also hateth he man and earth. Confined and awkward are still his soul, and the wings of his spirit. But in man there is more of the child than in the youth, and less of the melancholy. Better understandeth he about life and death. Free for death, and free in death, a holy naysayer, when there is no longer time for yea. Thus understandeth he about life and death. That your dying may not be a reproach to man and the earth, my friends. That do I solicit from the honey of your soul. In your dying shall your spirit and your virtue still shine like an evening afterglow around the earth. Otherwise your dying hath been unsatisfactory. Thus will I die myself, that ye friends may love the earth more for my sake, and earth will I again become, to have rest in her that bore me. Verily, a goal had Zarathustra. He threw his ball. Now be ye friends of the heirs of my goal. To you I throw the golden ball. Best of all, do I see you, my friends, throw the golden ball, and so tarry I still a little while on the earth. Pardon me for it. Thus spake Zarathustra. Welp, Zarathustra's ideas on dying too soon or dying too early. I think out of this whole chapter, it's something, the biggest thing that I got out of that, let's see, was, to be sure, he who never liveth at the right time, how could he ever die at the right time? I think, honestly, yeah, that's the most, that makes the most sense to me. I don't think there is a right time for anyone to die. I think, I don't think that really makes sense as a concept, and I think Zarathustra says it early, and yet he then goes on to try and say otherwise. To try and say that some people, like, it means to die. I guess I'm coming from it from the perspective of thinking about a future in which aging isn't an issue. But in a situation where aging is an issue and you can see your body falling apart, I can certainly understand why you might choose to die before, as opposed to watching your body completely fall apart. You might say, oh, this is good enough for me. I can see where this story's going. I think I'll end it early. I can understand that. And I guess I'm coming from the perspective of, yeah, what if you didn't have to deal with aging? If you didn't have to deal with aging and seeing yourself falling apart, I guess you'd still have to deal with what he said about sometimes some people's bodies fall apart, but for other people, their spirit falls apart first. But who's to say that given infinite time, you wouldn't be able to heal your own spirit? I think given infinite time, you could go through any sort of periods of feeling like you're falling apart spiritually and then building yourself back up spiritually. And you would experience your own cycle of life and death without actually dying, but a metaphorical cycle of life and death as you come to see things in different ways. And I think that honestly is something that I aspire to, and I think if someone gave me the opportunity for infinite life, not in the genie sense of a genie being like, you're gonna live until the heat death of the universe and you'll never be able to die, but in the sense of like, you won't age, I sure as hell would take it. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think you'd rot away like that. I think every human being is constantly in a state of maturation. I think it's bullshit that people say, like, oh, you finish maturing at a certain age. You might physically, your body may stop growing and your body may stop changing at a certain point, which is not really true. It just stops changing in extreme ways. It changes. You make new pathways in the brain at any age. You can gain muscle at any age. You can change your body. It's just a different level of it. But people don't treat it that way. They act like, oh, this is the normal progression of life. You reach a certain point and there's no going forward. You might as well die. I don't believe that. I think that if you had infinite life, you'd be constantly changing. You'd be constantly going through a journey. And I don't think you'd really get bored. Or maybe that's just myself. And I'm someone who doesn't really get bored at all. I can't remember ever being bored. There's always something to think about or to do. And maybe it's different for people who get bored, that they might be more terrified of a situation where if they didn't age, where they might have to be forced to come to the conclusion of ending their own life, and they might be afraid of having to do that on their own. They might be too scared to do it on their own and also too scared to accept the life in front of them because of their boredom. I guess I could understand it from that perspective. I don't know. Well, that's enough for one episode. I'm sure I could talk about immortality and all of that for an infinite amount of time, and I probably will come back to that eventually, but for now, that's good. Talk to you next time. Later.